Good afternoon. It is March 20th. We are here for a Planning, Housing, and Parks Committee meeting. We are having a discussion about housing vouchers. We have our colleagues from the Housing Opportunities Commission who have come back and we identified and have continued to hear about a concern in the community, the 37,000 residents, the 6.5-year wait list that we have, and want to get a better handle and understanding of the program, which is largely a federally funded program that desperately needs more federal dollars. There are a number of efforts that our delegation has been working on and leading on, but we desperately need more support. And we want to talk through other options or other states, in fact, that have provided additional funding for state-level vouchers to do similar work, and also want to get a better handle of how we're serving the residents who are on the waiting list, waiting to get the type of support that they need, and any other options that we might have for shallow subsidies and other efforts and aspects that we could look into. Today is intended to be an informational session. We're going to hear a presentation from HOC on this. We'll be asking questions, and the goal is to have a basis for us to come back and to be continuously addressing this issue. Unfortunately, I don't think we're going to be able to resolve it today, but hopefully this will be part of an ongoing discussion that we need to be having of how we address this growing challenge, 37,000 residents on a wait list that takes 6.5 years for people who need the help and the support and the subsidies today. So with that, happy to turn it over to colleagues if you have any comments, and then ultimately turn it over to our colleagues in Housing Opportunities Commission to begin their presentation. Okay. Council staff, any comments, introductory comments that you have?
Thank you, Committee Chair. So as you know, Housing Choice Vouchers are a HUD-sponsored federal voucher program administered by public housing agencies, HOC, and also more municipal-based Rockville Housing Enterprise, which they were not able to join us today. They serve low-income elderly and disabled households. I'm going to, without any further ado, turn it over to HOC, but if you look at the packet, we have HOC's presentation deck, as well as the HOC payment standards for specific zip code voucher payments. We also included some DHHS services to end and prevent homelessness resources, because they do often work closely together in these housing resources. So I'll turn it over to HOC now.
All right, good afternoon, Mr. Chair, committee members. I'm Chelsea Andrews, Executive Director of the Housing Opportunities Commission. I'm here with a number of my colleagues, our Director of Housing Resource Division, Lynn Hayes, as well as our Director of Government Affairs, Ken Silverman. We look forward to providing you with an overview of the Housing Choice Voucher Program, share with you some of the details in terms of how we administer it, and open for questions. We look forward to this being informational for you as well as for members of the public. I'll turn it over to Ken Silverman to provide a high-level overview of the program and its inception over time, and when and how Montgomery County began to deploy vouchers in our county. Ken?
Thank you. Next slide, please. So we thought it'd be helpful to start with, very high-level context of federal housing policy over time. Federal housing policy really started with the New Deal under President Roosevelt in the 30s, public housing and a package of subsidized mortgage programs. In the 60s, under President Johnson, the Great Society reforms, he had the creation of HUD, and for the first time, tools where public housing authorities were able to go in and lease units on the private market and then sublease them at affordable rates. There was a reaction to that. In 1973, President Nixon announced a moratorium on all federal housing funding. And then Congress reacted in 1974 by passing the Housing and Community Development Act, which created Section 8 and the CDBG program. At the same time, in Montgomery County, you had the passage of the first inclusionary zoning law in the country, the MPDU program, as well as the creation of HOC in its current form in 1974. In 1983, you had the shift of Section 8 from a more project-based approach to the beginning of tenant-based vouchers, and then in 1998, under President Clinton, merging Section 8 together with a number of other programs to create the housing choice vouchers. And there have been, some changes, and funding has dipped up and down since then, but the sort of broad outlines of federal housing policy has really been more or less the same for the past 25 years. There was a proposal to very largely expand the housing funding in the Build Back Better Act, which was proposed by President Biden as part of the infrastructure package. Unfortunately, when that shifted to the Inflation Reduction Act, all of that funding was stripped out, and so there was no expansion of housing vouchers then. This slide shows kind of a high-level overview of the process from Congress, how the funding flows through HUD to the individual PHAs, public housing authorities, like HOC. So in FY23, you had $26.4 billion appropriated for housing assistance payments, and then there is a separate account which funds administrative costs for the public housing authorities, and that's appropriated and awarded separately. HUD develops inflationary and proration factors each year, so they basically take the total housing assistance payments that were made across the country in the previous year. They apply an inflation factor. This year they've estimated it's going to be 10.13%, and then they compare that total to the appropriated funding, and if the appropriation is not sufficient, then they apply a proration factor that would apply, and then they have sort of a similar process for each PHA, where they look at your housing assistance payments the previous year, apply their inflation and proration factors, and they do look and inspect, and we have a pretty rigorous annual process by which they determine whether our utilization is high enough, and we've been very successful over time in keeping it above 95%, which is where it needs to be. Occasionally, HUD will offer notices of funding opportunities for some of the smaller special programs that target particularly vulnerable populations, and HOC has been very aggressive and successful in applying for and receiving additional vouchers under those opportunities over the last several years. So I think if we go to the next slide, Lynn is going to go over what it looks like at HOC.
Good afternoon, council members. This slide is to provide an overview of the allocation of vouchers that HOC administers. We administer 6,882 tenant-based vouchers. This is the largest allocation of vouchers that we have. Families selected to receive any of these vouchers on this slide must have incomes at or below 50% of the area median income. However, the majority of our families have incomes at 30% of the area median income. A HUD requirement is that all new admissions we select from the wait list are 75% of those new admissions are at 30% of the AMI or lower. And as I'm using the word families, I just would like to highlight that families is a HUD definition that may include a single person or an individual, so it doesn't have to be more than one person. We have an allocation of 660 non-elderly disabled vouchers, or NEDs. These vouchers are for non-elderly disabled families whose head of household or spouse meet that criteria. Similar to the NED vouchers, we have 144 mainstream disabled vouchers, or MSDs. Like the NED vouchers, the household member must be non-elderly or disabled. However, it does not have to be the head of household or spouse. The qualifying family member can be anyone in the household. Additionally, these families must be homeless, at risk of homelessness, or transitioning out of an institution or segregated setting. We have 118 emergency housing vouchers. These vouchers are for families who are homeless, at risk of homelessness, fleeing domestic violence, dating violence, or human trafficking. These applicants for these emergency housing vouchers are referred to us from the Department of Health and Human Services. We have 113 Veterans Affairs Supportive Housing, or VASH vouchers. These vouchers are for homeless veterans, and they are referred to us from the VA. And we have 18 Family Unification, or FUP vouchers allocated to our program. These vouchers are for families to reunite with their children if they don't have stable housing, or for youth under the age of 25 who are transitioning out of foster care. Next slide. This slide is providing an overview of the Housing Choice Voucher application process. Families must apply for housing assistance via our waitlist housing path, which is electronic. It's open year-round. It never closes. Families may use any type of device, a telephone, laptop, computer, to apply for the assistance. If they don't have that technology available to them, they may come into one of our offices. We have 2 customer service centers, one in downtown Silver Spring and one in Gaithersburg, and there are kiosks and staff available to help applicants with the application process. We have 2 priorities. The first priority or preference is for families who are displaced resulting from a natural disaster or redevelopment. Those families are referred to us from the county executive. Additionally, we have a preference for families who live or work in Montgomery County. Once an applicant applies to our wait list, we select them according to their preferences and the date and time of their application. We then send them a complete application to complete and return to HOC. Upon receipt of that information, we verify several things, including the preferences that they've declared, their income, their household composition, etc. Many other factors applicable to their individual household composition. Once the family is determined eligible to receive or to participate in the program, we issue them a voucher, which is good for a 90-day term. If the family is unsuccessful in securing a unit to live within those 90 days, they may request an extension from HOC for an additional 90 days, so up to a total of 180-day search term. The family then secures a unit on its own with a private landlord in the rental market. Once they've secured the unit that they would like to rent, we then verify that the landlord has a Montgomery County rental license. We inspect the property, and then we conduct rent reasonableness and affordability testing. Contingent that the family has met those requirements, we would then give approval to take possession of the unit and enter into a contractual agreement with the landlord. Next slide. This slide is providing statistical information about the Housing Choice Voucher Program. Again, our current baseline is 7,702 vouchers, so this is the maximum number of families that we may serve. However, this number excludes mainstream, disabled, and emergency housing vouchers, which are funded separately. Though our baseline is 7,702, we're currently serving more than that number. Actually, 8,412 families we're serving. As you may be aware, the voucher program is transferable or portable anywhere in the United States. So we have a very high influx of customers who come to Montgomery County from other jurisdictions. Right now we have 805 incoming ports coming into Montgomery County. Our current utilization rate is 96%. 34% of our voucher holders are elderly. 32% of the families that we serve are disabled. The average income for a voucher family is $22,695. The average household size is 2.3 persons. We pay a subsidy amount of $1,267. That's the average subsidy or housing assistance payment that we pay every month. And our families pay an average of $518 a month for their rent and utilities. In addition to the special purpose vouchers, the mainstream and emergency housing vouchers that I've mentioned, we also have project-based vouchers. Project-based vouchers are similar to tenant-based vouchers in how we calculate the rent and the eligibility criteria. However, the subsidy is tied to a specific unit and it is not transferable anywhere in the United States. According to the federal guidelines, we may project base up to 20% of our baseline, and we project base a little more than half of that, or 11%. Next slide. This slide is providing an overview of the applicants on our wait list. As you can see, it's very extensive with over 36,000 applicants waiting for housing assistance. Of that 36,000, 27,519 families are waiting specifically to receive a housing choice voucher. The average wait time is 6.5 years. The majority of our families stay on the program for a very long time. 29% stay on the program for 10 to 20 years. 13% of our families stay on the program for over 20 years. The average wait time, again, is 6.5 years. Families on the wait list must recertify or update their application annually. We reach out to them to remind them of this requirement. We start 30 days prior to the effective date and send continuous or numerous reminders. Families on the wait list are eligible to receive financial literacy training, credit counseling, education counseling, and career counseling services from our partner agencies. And though we're the housing authority for Montgomery County, units within the city limits of Rockville are administered by the Rockville Housing Enterprises. We notify our families accordingly that they may have to port or transfer to Rockville Housing if they so choose a unit in that vicinity.
Next slide. We wanted to just put in context, this is a slide. Oh, thanks. We wanted to put in context that despite the fact that we provide this subsidy to many of our voucher holders, we still have participants that are rent burdened. This is a slide that we shared previously, but wanted to just reemphasize more than 19% of voucher holders are still rent burdened. That means that they pay more than 30% of their income towards their rent. The average rent burden voucher holder pays 46% of their income on rent. And of course, because of the high cost of living in Montgomery County, we at HOC are constantly exploring ways to increase our payment standards. We are able to request a waiver from HUD once a year, and recently we did so, asking to go up to 112% of the published fair market rents so that we could increase the subsidy. On average, our rents still exceed in this county the voucher payment standards by $193. Next slide. And this slide just gives some context as it pertains to where an individual is more likely to utilize their vouchers based on the cost of living across our county, and it highlights the top 15 Montgomery County zip codes with the most families using the voucher program. Next slide. I'll turn it back over to Ken Silverman to provide some context in regards to how other jurisdictions are approaching creating local rent supplement programs.
Thank you. So the committee had asked for examples of what other jurisdictions were doing about this issue. The most comprehensive source that we could find was a 2016 study by the National Low-Income Housing Coalition that surveyed all 50 states and the 70 biggest cities in the country, and they created a database with 156 active programs. These, as you can see, the programs included locally funded voucher programs, but also emergency rental assistance programs, project-based programs, programs targeted at different particularly vulnerable populations, tax credits and other kinds of tax expenditures, and some other kinds of financial assistance that they were able to make available for renters. So next slide. Some examples of some of the biggest state-funded programs are in Massachusetts, New Jersey, and here in Washington, D.C., where they each have voucher programs. They all have slight differences, but they essentially mirror the structure and the payment standards of the federal Housing Choice Voucher Program. You can see in New Jersey and D.C., there's an average budget of around $40 million to serve between 3,500 and 4,000 families. They have a mix of tenant-based and project-based vouchers. And there is a bill this session in Maryland by our own delegates Wilkins and Stewart in the House that would create a similar program here in Maryland. And we've been very excited about that prospect and pleased to work with Delegate Wilkins to make sure that if it is adopted, we'll be able to fit it seamlessly into the to serve our wait list as well. Next slide, please. There is another category of programs which are shallow subsidy programs. A good example is right here in Montgomery County. I know you're all very familiar with the rental assistance program administered by Health and Human Services. That was a common structure that many of the cities in the survey had. These programs are generally much shorter in duration, much more limited in eligibility, and really designed to serve households that are in crisis, at imminent risk of homelessness or experiencing homelessness. And then one more innovative concept from DC is the DC Flex program. From 2017 to 2022, there was a pilot program that they launched together with the Urban Institute, where they gave participants $7,200 per year as a rent subsidy, but they allowed the participants to choose how much they wanted to spend in each month, so that they could even out ups and downs in their income over the course of the year, weather unexpected expense. And there was a preliminary report issued in 2018 that showed some promising data about reducing the participants' need to receive other forms of assistance, their outcomes in terms of the number of families that ended up experiencing homelessness over that time. But that was only 1 year, and we're still waiting the release of the final report, following the conclusion of the program. So, next slide. I think.
Thank you. We open for questions.
I know we have lots of questions. Appreciate you ending on the DC Flex program. I am very interested in looking at that as an option for us in Montgomery County. Obviously, it limits the number of households. We're not talking about the tens of thousands who are in need, who are on the wait list, but obviously makes a big difference. The flexibility, I think, is significant. And in fact, it's somewhat reminiscent and similar in concept to guaranteed basic income that Councilmember Jawando and Councilmember Albornoz and others have really championed in the last council. And so I do think that's something that our committee should take a look at. It's not exactly guaranteed basic income, but it's really an effort to do the same thing, which is to provide flexibility to residents, to allow them to make their own choices and provide them with the foundation to be able to make choices that otherwise they wouldn't be able to make without that level of support. So when I saw that in the slide deck, I immediately thought of you, Councilmember Jawando, so I appreciate that, wanted to note that. And he was showing me that he had written down exactly what I just said. So you can see that we're clearly on the same the same page here. I'll turn it over to colleagues to talk about it. I think we need to talk about two things. One is, what do we do to increase the Housing Choice Voucher Program in Montgomery County to increase the number of people who receive this level of support, whether it's from the federal government, the state, the county, or otherwise, and how we serve those who are on the wait list. I'll ask one question, then I'll turn to colleagues, and I'll come back for the other questions that I have. But I think it's helpful for you to share with us and to share with the millions watching at home. For the 37,000 people on the wait list, or 27,000, I think, that are specifically for the Housing Choice Voucher Program, specifically, what are they doing now? What happens in the 6.5 years that they're waiting to see if they'll be eligible for a voucher, and whether or not it comes through? Are you communicating with them? Is someone else communicating with them? Are they accessing other programs or resources? What is that population doing? When we talk about that number, can you just give us a window into, what does that mean?
Great question, Councilmember Friedson. The truth is, we hope to learn more about what our voucher holders are doing day to day by way of survey and by obtaining more data from those residents. We don't currently have a lot of data in regards to what they do in the meantime. What we do know is if they contact our offices, we provide them with resources, connect them to other services across the county, work with partners, ensure that they have access to and participate in any programs that we have, financial literacy, coaching. All of those resources are available to everyone on the waiting list. But the question that you asked in terms of where are they staying? Are they living with residents? Are they floating from place to place? Are they in shelters? Where are they? That's a great question that we don't honestly currently have the answer to. We are in the process of updating our waiting list. Our current system is under a revamp, and when we do that, we will be reaching out and requiring additional information as we survey waitlist participants. But as it stands, the way that we interact is by sending out information on an ongoing basis about our resources, encouraging them to remain and keep their information updated on our waiting list, and connecting them with the resources that we're aware of. Any additional information on where they currently are residing, if they're doubled up in homes, etc., is information that we still need to gain a better appreciation for.
And how does someone get off, besides obviously if they get a voucher through HOC, which would take them off the wait list, but are there other ways to get off the wait list? If life circumstances change, or if they move to another jurisdiction in those 6.5 years, is there a mechanism for you to know whether or not they're still here and they're still in need and they're still waiting for the voucher?
What does happen is when we are in the process of reaching out to voucher holders because of opportunities for either vouchers and or units that have become available, we do go through the process of contacting each of those households to determine if they're still in this area, if they meet the criteria, and that's the process in which we get an understanding of if they're still in need and if they're still local, and then they would come off of the wait list if they're not reachable or if they're not eligible. If we're unable to reach someone, they actually still remain on the list. They would go into a dormant status, and if they reach back out and update their information, they're placed back in the queue. But as it pertains to coming off the waiting list, it's very seldom that someone reaches out and says, I no longer want to be on the waiting list. What happens is they get contacted as we go down the waiting list to reach out to potential residents and or voucher holders.
Got it. Thanks. I have other questions, but I'm going to yield to colleagues first, and we can go back and forth. I'm sure there'll be some questions, and then answers will, spark other questions. So I just want to be able to have a fluid conversation here. So I'll turn to Councilmember Joanda.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation and the work. A lot here, and obviously I want to underscore Chair Friedson's advocacy for more money at the federal level, and the state level. Obviously, as we talked about, that's been needed for a long time, and I think this underscores the gravity of it. So as far as eligibility, you list in your packet, and I think it's important to point out that 75% of the vouchers are in the extremely low income category, right? So we're talking about the people who need this the absolute most, and it still isn't enough often for them, as your slide demonstrated. And that's about $50,000, a little less for a single household, 56 for two-person, and 64 for three-person household, which is that correct?
Yes.
And that's well below, less than half of what the area median income is, and obviously well below the self-sufficiency standard for people to be able to live here. It also doesn't include, everyone's required to have a Social Security number, right?
Yes.
So that's leaving many people off the table. There has been discussion over the years of, that requirement, but I just want to just step back and say, like, even though we're helping these folks, there's still a lot of people we aren't helping, and so the people who are waiting know the eligibility. So there's 36,000 people that are in the extremely low income category that have Social Security numbers that are waiting. There's all the other incomes and people who don't have Social Security numbers, for example, who need help too. And the scale of this is immense, even within this program. You talked about the more data of the folks on the list. We have addresses, I would presume, for you to be able to be on the waiting list, you have to provide an address in Montgomery County?
Yes, that's correct.
And so, have you looked at the data of where, and again, some of these people are probably using other people's addresses, or they're living, they did live there. I'm sure that the data is in flux because these are housing insecure folks who are on this list. But do you have it would be interesting to see where those are coming from and having that data?
Okay. We have not done that.
You get the question I'm asking?
Absolutely, and that's the one component as we gear up even for strategic planning. That's an area of opportunity for HLC. We definitely have to gain a better appreciation of who's on our waiting list, where they're located, what their need is. Of course, I have theories around even the concept of shallow subsidy being able to provide and whittle down that waiting list significantly. At the time when we launched the waiting list, there were some questions that were optional and some questions that were required. Looking at it as we move forward, we need to make more questions required. That would help us gain a better appreciation of who and what individuals are on our list. And so we are in the process of revamping that. We will be doing a full public launch, asking people to update their information, getting more insight, and leaning in on some of our in-house data specialists to help us analyze that data, and look forward to providing an update once we have that information.
And I appreciate that. And there's always, data is something you can always have more and deeper. But that's something we have today. What I'm just mentioning, you could go on the Excel spreadsheet and export the 36,000 and say, here's where the people live, and do an analysis of that. But obviously do the more robust stuff for sure. But I just think there's some things we could know now that could be helpful to your point. And I'm glad to hear that you all are undertaking that. Could you just explain too, again, for the millions watching at home, the voucher versus someone who lives in an HOC property, and how the difference between of those entities and any overlap?
Absolutely. If you have a voucher, a federal voucher, it's paid through HUD by a subsidy that's issued by HUD to HOC. And so it's a federal voucher that allows for paying up to 70% of the rent for an individual that is deemed eligible. And it is a voucher that can be used anywhere in the United States. So it allows for mobility. It allows the individual who receives that voucher to look at different jurisdictions, to enter into a lease with a landlord directly. It provides context in regards to what the payment standards are in each of these places, but allows for that mobility. HOC has a number of properties, standalone properties across this county and units across this county where individuals are able to live in our units that are subsidized by way of HOC and multiple funding streams. And those residents who live in those units pay a portion of their rent, up to 30% or different percentages depending on that particular program and those different properties. And it's permanent. The subsidy is tied to the unit. And so as the individual moves, they don't have a voucher. They could potentially move to another HOC unit, but the subsidy stays with those particular units across the county.
Appreciate that. And how many of those units do you have? I know that's slightly different, but I'm just trying to get a sense of the picture for folks, vouchers versus the HOC controlled units.
Yes, we have over 16,000 units across the county that have varying levels of subsidy.
Yes. I appreciate that. I think I've said this to some of you before. My father lived at Tanglewood for many years, one of your properties, and benefited for over 20 years from a subsidy, and allowed him to eventually become a homeowner. So when you relieve that pressure, it's really important. Last question I have for now, and then I'll kick it to my colleagues. The use of a voucher. You know, we hear a lot of discrimination in the voucher market when you take a voucher, even though if you have it. You talked about all the great benefits, the mobility, you can enter in directly with the lease, all the rights you have. What do we have by way of data of voucher around where vouchers are not accepted, and what are we doing about it?
Mm-hmm. It's a great question. I'll set the stage and I'll turn it over to Lynn to provide more context. But we do keep track of and brief our voucher holders on the potential of housing discrimination and encourage them to report to us if they're experiencing discrimination so that we can refer them and provide resources to them in regards to that. And of course, if anybody who receives a voucher is having a difficult time with a landlord, we also make that referral as well, provide an extension of time for them to look for units. Here in Montgomery County, source of income cannot be a basis of discrimination, but we do know that many landlords find ways around that. And so we try to empower our residents to know how and what resources are available if they're experiencing discrimination. I'll turn it over to you, Lynn, to provide more context as it pertains to how we do that.
Sure, we recognize that when a family's voucher is expiring or approaching expiration, they're required to submit a search log to us to receive a voucher extension. Typically, that search log is what identifies if possible discrimination occurs. At that time, we refer the family to the Human Rights Commission to pursue an investigation. I don't have a specific number for you right now, but certainly can get that and provide you with that statistic, but it is not extremely high, but we do record and track that information.
And by search log, you mean people who have searched online for properties, and if they have a high number of searches, that could maybe be one of the factors to leading if they haven't secured housing or something. Explain what you mean by that.
We require the families to demonstrate to us that they've made a good faith effort to secure housing within the voucher term. So we ask for a minimum of 10 entries showing what efforts have you made to find a place to live, to rent. And so typically the search log will indicate where they've gone, when they went, and the outcome, what happened. So if they indicate, for example, landlord doesn't accept voucher, we know that that's a discrimination case.
Okay. I would love to see that data as well. So
Sure.
Thank you. All right, I'll pause for now. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. If you could share that data with us, it's important. I'm aware of a 2018 study that looked at different jurisdictions and what the denial rates were, and they're substantially different. I mean, at least according to what I've seen in Los Angeles and Fort Worth, they were more than 3/4, 78%, and I think 76%, which is just an egregiously high number. And DC was much lower, but still concerning at 15%. I mean, the number should be 0, obviously. But obviously 15% is a lot different than 76 or 78%. I'm hoping that we're much closer to DC and hopefully even lower than that, but it would be helpful to be aware of that. I'll turn to Councilmember Fanny Gonzalez.
Thank you for that presentation. A couple of questions. The first one, just out of curiosity, why is it that current utilization is at 96%? Why isn't it 100? I'm on page 6 of your...
We're always striving to get to maximum utilization, but we are actually at a very high number in comparison to many other housing authorities. So what that percentage that we're at is considered exceptionally high for a housing authority our size. There's turnover time. So the amount of time it takes to bring someone through the briefing and for them to find a unit and then to get leased up, that's the time frame, the turnover time that you're seeing there as it pertains to utilization. But we continue to increase our utilization. I think we're currently at 96%.
Yeah.
And so that allows us to get full funding from HUD.
Makes sense.
I just would like to add, if I may, we select a minimum of 200 families from our wait list every month, and the vouchers are issued through attrition. Our attrition rate is 444 per year, but we very actively select applicants from the wait list monthly to increase the utilization rate, and it has increased substantially from last year to this year. So we're continuing to work on that goal to serve as many families as we can.
Beautiful. Thank you for that. The last question is, you know, every time I get this type of presentations, not just here, but also when I was in parking planning, I'll always expect to have, you know, what is my goal? What's the strategy to ensure that all the thousands of people that we have on waiting lists will disappear? So I feel like I need that from you. What is next here? What are the type of things that we need as a county to ensure that we're really fulfilling our goal of ensuring that no one in our county is without a home? A home is everything, right? You need a home even to have, you know, a driver's license, go to school, fill out a job application. You need that address. So what's your ideal strategy to make sure this ends? Is it more housing? What is it that you need?
I think it really boils down to the three things that I continue to hone in on. It's producing more housing, it's preserving the affordable housing that we have, and it's protecting those voucher holders and ensuring that we have subsidies available for individuals who
Do more
need those
housing.
resources.
No, do anything that will stop building more housing. I agree. Is that something? Do you have like something in writing where you can say, ideally, Montgomery County is, and this should be part of your strategic plan, right? And I'm sure you can work with the planning department on this, and they're doing the attainable study initiative right now, dealing with more housing creation. But even if it's a number, like you show that, what was it, Washington, D.C. had $30 million? No, what is it? Well, in the state, we're asking for $15 million, right? The legislation that it's being seen right now. And then you hear, I think it was your last, DC, well, that's DC Flex. But what's that magic number that you think Montgomery County should be, you know, DC local rent subsidy has an annual budget of $40 million. What do you think in terms of recommendations, something more direct? This is what we're having in Montgomery County, and this is really where we should be moving towards.
It's a very complex response to provide because it's a combination of what it would cost to produce. That's a different number than what it would cost to provide everyone with a subsidy, which is a different number than what it will cost to preserve and ensure that we do not lose affordable units across this county. We have introduced, and the council has been extremely supportive, and thank you for the $100 million for the Housing Production Fund. It is being fully utilized and will assist in producing the additional affordable housing that we need. Councilmember Fina Gonzalez, you might recall, we had a slide, and I wish we had it available to show you, that showed how many additional units we were able to produce with the Housing Production Fund,
Yeah, I
how
remember
much
that.
more we would need if we got from the state. It is really a combination, and it is the information that we hope to obtain from our waiting list that will help inform if the production or subsidy should be where we put the majority of our resources. But either way, committee, and I look forward to coming back to provide more context, but there is not a magic number that would get us to address all of the issues, because we have to make sure we continue to preserve as well as produce.
Yeah, I'm a numbers person, and I have said this so many times in many different presentations. You gotta have a number and constantly look at it and revise it so you can measure success. How can we really lower this number of people on the waiting list? And yes, you explain different strategies, but you always need to have them in front of you and see how you are actually, what your actions are doing to affect that that reality. It should be constant, and this is what we have this year, and this is what we're accomplishing. For next year, we need to be more aggressive. It should be this way, and you measure that way. Otherwise, it's just hard to keep track and see how we're moving forward. Even preservation, I'm with you 100% with everything that you said. But if you don't show me the data and how we're moving forward, it's hard, especially now that we're dealing with a budget. It's hard to push for this when you're not constantly educating people of what the needs are. And before I forget, going back with a question on the Social Security number, is it the head of the household that needs to have the Social Security number, or could be one of the family members, including a child?
It's all household members must have
All
this-
of them must have a social.
the
Well, that's
Social
like
Security.
crazy.
Yeah.
How we change that? Is a federal law. Oh, okay. Well, that's not gonna happen. That's not happening anytime soon. Okay, moving on. It's just looking at the realities in Montgomery County. I honestly, at least for me, I need to have the data in front of me, seeing how we're moving forward.
Absolutely. I think what I want to put in context is there is a number in regards to how many units we will lose in terms of naturally occurring affordable housing, right? So there is a number there. There are COG goals. So the region has determined how many units we need to produce. So it's over 30,000 units. We have on our waiting list 36,000 people that have, of those 36,000 people, 27,000 have indicated they need a voucher. And so when we look at a voucher, the cost for a voucher is a voucher holder in terms of rent per year can range between 12 to 15,000. So, of course we came in to talk about the voucher program, but we can definitely put into context how much would it cost to continue to address the preservation need, which is definitely something that I know many of us are looking at. There is also the production need, which we can talk about and look at and base it on those regional goals, which are data informed to some extent. And then we could also look at what we do know in regards to our waiting list. You have 27,000 families that have requested a voucher, and what the cost of that may be per year. And so we can do that analysis. I will challenge that analysis a little bit, which is why I didn't want to speculate, because I do believe that of those 27,000 individuals who've indicated they need a voucher, many of them may need a shallow subsidy and not a full voucher, which might allow us to help more families. We need the data to support that information, and this next effort and iteration of our contact with clients will help us better understand how many of you need a shallow subsidy to remain housed, how many of you fall within that parameter of 0 to 30% that really needs that full subsidy, and then what is the delta in that number. And then you have to balance that with HLC is producing units, our nonprofit partners are producing units, and those are places and spaces where people can move. But then there are times, and just the sheer reality of it is that we might have vacancies in some of those units because people would prefer to wait and not move to some of those units. And that's something that we are dealing with on an ongoing basis. It could be because of where that unit is located. It could be because they want their kids in a different school zone. All of these things that we have to balance out in terms of how we make the perfect combination of getting everyone housed and ensuring that they're successful in whatever program and or resource that we provide to them.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
forward to your reports and all that data.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. So obviously there's a lot here. We're focusing on the housing choice vouchers, but it's not unrelated to all the other conversations that we have. So I really appreciate the line of, I wouldn't even say line of questioning, I would say the line of conversation. As a matter of scale, if I'm not mistaken, ARPA at the federal level, at a $5 billion investment, it was just for the emergency housing vouchers. That $5 billion investment nationwide was for 70,000 emergency housing vouchers. So if we think about the scale and why we need a federal solution to this challenge, we don't have local resources to be able to meet that level of voucher subsidy on an ongoing basis, perhaps on an emergency basis. We have been able to do that at times to supplement, but we need the federal government, and Ahmed, I know both of us were nodding, we need to continue to advocate for ITINs as well as Social Security numbers, because your Social Security number doesn't dictate your need in terms of housing and food, and healthcare. So I think it's, we don't turn away people in a hospital. We don't turn away people in our schools based on their immigration status. We shouldn't be turning them away from, support for shelter. It causes us a lot more other challenges. I know we all agree on that. On the voucher question, how do you decide? You broke down the kind of traditional housing choice voucher and then the various other types that are much smaller in terms of numbers that you, I think, refer to as like specialized vouchers. How do you dictate that? Are those specifically funded in those categories by HUD, and so you have that finite number available, and then you look to see who is eligible, number one, and number two, are those folks in the broader category who would be eligible for a traditional voucher, but then also are doubly eligible for these specialized funds, and so you're looking to see, they're essentially checking a box, are you, an elderly individual that meets the age restrictions, are you disabled and you meet the disability requirement, et cetera, and then you look to see for that, or is this a separate category of application?
It depends. There are different programs that have different requirements. There are some programs that are referrals from different parties, such as DHHS, as well as the veterans, VA, that allow for referrals to come directly from those particular entities. But there are programs where we receive funding from HUD, and Lynn mentioned earlier we respond to and have been successful with obtaining resources through what's called a NOFO, which is Notice of Funding Opportunities. So when funding opportunities become available for these specialized programs, we apply for them. HUD grants us these resources based on their algorithm, and then we utilize those resources. And we do go through our waiting list based on how an individual has reflected what their need is, if they're disabled, senior, etc., to determine if they're eligible for these different vouchers.
So do you have a separate wait list for those categories, or it's the broader wait list and then certain people are marked with the other funds that they're eligible for? I'm just trying to understand how
it's the broader
tackle
wait
this.
list,
Yeah.
and so how the applicant completes the wait list, we use that information to select. So an example would be if we, first of all, through attrition for these special programs, when someone leaves, we have to replace that voucher with that same special program. And so we would select, based on the criteria of these programs, how the applicant completed their application, if that makes sense.
Got it. And speaking of attrition, you mentioned 444 a year, I think was the number
Yes.
you shared earlier.
Right.
In terms of attrition, do you do a analysis, like do you understand why they're, what the
Why they're
reasoning
leaving.
for the attrition is? Are they, moving towards a pathway of home ownership, for instance, and it's a positive outcome where, HOC and other supportive partners have helped them move to another category, which has freed up their voucher, which would be a terrific outcome that we all would want? Is it, other issues? Do you have a sense of that?
Yes, we do track that information, and we're happy to provide you with that. A good portion have left because of death, especially during the pandemic. We have, a high percentage of seniors in our program, so some voluntarily leave to go to nursing homes where they require a higher level of assistance. We do have some homeowners. We have some people who skip and we don't know why, they just leave, but we have all of that data. And we do track, yes, why they leave. In terms of percentiles, I don't have that right now, but happy to get that to you.
Treasure trove of data that you're
Yeah,
going to share with us.
we
I
have
hope you'll
that-
share with us
sure.
that, because I think it would be very instructive for us to understand of the 444 individuals and families that are moving out of the voucher program, why?
It shifted.
Is it good? Is it bad? It's probably a combination of everything.
Yeah.
Different circumstances for different people, but it would be helpful to know that. In terms of the data itself, I agree long term and ultimately with lots of federal support that we need to fix the voucher program, and we need our federal partners to help us, and we need an infusion of tens of billions of dollars in federal investment, because we are not unique in this massive thousands and thousands of families needing vouchers and not being able to get them. But in the meantime, what is the next step, at least for us, in terms of the data that we talked about? You talked about doing a deeper dive into the data, understanding. What does that look like? What does that mean? What are we diving into? What are we analyzing? How are we going to do that? What's the timing of what we're going to come out of it? I mean, I think it would be, at least in that sense, would be helpful to understand what is our goal and our objective.
Twofold. We do have data as it pertains to the voucher participants. So we are able to look at who's in our program, know those demographics. That's why we were able to share how many are disabled and how many are senior, and what the average time frame in which an individual is in our program. So we have the information related to the individuals we serve. Where we need additional analysis is as it pertains to our waiting list. And so we are in the process of standing up a new software for our waiting list. I would say over the course of the next few months, we will begin transitioning into that software, as well as beginning a public campaign around the same time that we're launching our strategic planning outreach efforts. And so that is something that we are gearing up for, at least by this summer, to begin to engage more meaningfully. We'll have the information for people on our waiting list, but as well as focus group sessions and special group information. And so we'll be gathering a lot of data over the course of the strategic planning process that will take place this summer and in the fall, that will help inform us in many ways. The other thing I would just say is, in addition to thinking about how do we get more vouchers, the question you asked about what is the success rate of individuals with vouchers is an important one. That's another place where we can see success in terms of if we're able to increase and change the outcomes of individuals who are in our households, who are using vouchers to move on and not need that subsidy, us being able to move more swiftly with pulling people from the waiting list. As Lynn shared, people remain with our vouchers for many, many years. And so I think if we think about holistically the education opportunities, the economic opportunities, many of the other drivers that determine how long an individual requires subsidy, that's another way that we could potentially start to see
That was gonna be
some
my
additional
follow-up
movement.
question. So you're a step ahead of me, as usual. What would be successful, whether you have a number or whether HUD has a number or whether there's an Urban Institute type think tank that is involved in this work that has a number of the amount of years that somebody should be on a voucher, should require a voucher before, as a policy goal, we would want them to be moving towards another pathway. Do we have a number for that? Is it
Another
3 years,
complex
5 years,
question.
7 years, 20 years? I don't know the answer to that, but I think as you engage in a strategic plan and you start thinking about this program, one of the things that we can do in turn, you can only control what we can control. We can't control the number of vouchers that the federal government provides for us, but we could control how we're supporting the families that are in the voucher program to help them move out of the voucher program so that we free up additional vouchers for more people. We need more to come in, but we also need to help those families transition out. And I would like us, as a follow-up, to think about, what are the programs that we are providing to these families? What are the pathways that we are, providing? What would be success? How do we set that number, and then how do we determine whether or not we're making progress or not? And I think that really speaks to Councilmember Fani Gonzalez's point. We need to set a target. And I think on this, I'm not sure what the goal ought to be. I mean, when it comes to services to end and prevent homelessness, we do have certain targets of the timeline that we want to provide these emergency subsidies and supports before we transition them to another program, and then hopefully out of programs and into permanent and stable housing and medical support and mental health support and job opportunities, et cetera. I'm just wondering if that will be part of the conversation.
Interesting policy discussion and debate around how long subsidies should be provided. Definitely, as it pertains to HUD rules and requirements, our current program has that if you're unassisted for over 6 months, then you're no longer in need of the voucher. There are housing authorities that have a designation called Moving to Work. It's a title that doesn't have anything to do with the actual program, but it is a MTW status, and it allows for our peers across the nation to try different approaches in terms of how long an individual can be unsubsidized before they are no longer eligible for the voucher program. There's a theory of thought around the fact that the impact of structural and systemic racism means that even if someone is demonstrating independence for a period of time, does not mean that they're not susceptible to a circumstance resulting in them needing a subsidy again. One of the areas that I would think would be interesting to explore is the recidivism rate, in terms of you were successful and then did you end up back on our list and have to wait another 6.5 years. I think a pilot program around ensuring that anyone who needs to come back still has a safe space and is held back into the program in some way would be an interesting way to address that.
I think it would be also helpful to know, is a voucher the right support? Because someone who's temporarily returning to a situation of need, even if there was a period of time where they didn't have need, is that a temporary situation where they need a temporary intervention and support that could be provided, which doesn't necessarily mean a voucher, which is a different type of structural subsidy? Or is it emergency support to go through a period of crisis?
Right.
For instance, because you're more susceptible to being in a period of crisis if you have ever been on the voucher list, I would imagine. And I think that would be helpful to really dive into and better understand as you engage in the strategic plan. But obviously these are big, huge questions, not unique to us, but I think would be helpful for us to determine how we could support the program and make sure that it's successful with the limited resources and tools that we have at the local level.
Absolutely. And of course, the emergency rental assistance programs that the county provides is a wonderful resource to anyone having a short-term emergency. And as you were speaking, I was thinking of hoping that our peers who administer that program ask the question of, have you had a voucher within the last number of years? If not, looking to my team to make a note of that so that that can be another data point for us. And so there are definitely many areas for us to explore in terms of how do we best support individuals who are in these programs. Of course, we back out individuals who are senior and or disabled, because those individuals have set incomes that won't be increasing over time, and really become more familiar and acquainted with what we need to support those individuals who are on the cusp of being able to be completely independent, ensuring that we don't have a program that makes them lean towards not getting that next advancement so that they can continue to receive a subsidy, and thinking through all of the ways that we continue to serve these residents in our county, our residents. And so we've, of course, noted these questions. This will be a part of a larger discussion and analysis as we go through this strategic planning process.
One final follow-up on that, and then I'll turn to Councilmember Jawando. How would somebody who's on the wait list know whether they're the 100th or the 27,000th person on the wait list?
That's a difficult question for us. We receive it often, and in fact, when individuals call, we're unable to indicate to them where they are on the waiting list, other than providing general concept as it pertains to we're pulling from 2015 or we're pulling from 2016, because there are so many factors that impact where and how someone is rated in the waiting list. And so we're not able to provide that data, but we are able to provide context as it pertains to the year that we're pulling from at the time that we begin to pull individuals from the waiting list.
I think as you dive into this and you do the strategic plan, if there is any way to provide a greater level of understanding of where someone realistically sits on the list, I think that would be crucial. Because we hear time and time again the hopelessness and the exasperation of, I don't know if I'm next, if I should be sitting by my phone and waiting for a phone call, because realistically this could be a life-changing moment for my family and me, or whether I'm out of luck and this is going to be 4, 5, 6 years, easily, bless you, before I hear from that. And I think at the very least, on a human level, people just need to know. And I understand it's not good news for a lot of people on this list, because the list is so much longer than the resources that we have. But at the very least, if we could just level with people and let them understand where they stand on this list. I know that is an administrative challenge, particularly because of all the layers of eligibility that you are navigating through. But if there's a way even to come up with a technological fix where we could weed people out by their, the 30% AMI threshold, which is a different standard at 75% that you need to be looking for, where they sit on that list versus the broader list, if they check another box in terms of their age or ability or disability status, to me, I think that's very important. So not an easy thing to fix, but I think it's a critical one.
Understood and agreed. We will definitely take that feedback into consideration, as well as look at best practices across the nation. Many of our peers take the same approach, because we obviously don't want to share with someone that you're next and then they're not next. But there is a way to think about, again, are you within the 1 year time frame? Are you within the 6 month time frame? Are you in the 6 year time frame? So we will definitely take that feedback into consideration.
Appreciate that. It doesn't have to be perfect, but I think that would make a big difference. And I'm just thinking of when you call customer service, the difference between the music that you hear that's ongoing and indefinite, and you have no idea how long. Is it going to be 1 minute or 3 hours? Versus being told when you pick up the phone, the current wait time is 1 hour and 10 minutes, and at least at least you can prepare mentally for that. It's a much easier situation, I think, on just a basic human level. But with that, I'll yield to you, Councilmember Joanna.
Thank you. Yeah, and I just agree with that. I think knowing that it's almost impossible to give it your next. It's not you're number 2 of number 36,000. I mean, no one, I don't think any of us is requesting that, but to your point, knowing you're within a year or you're within that would be helpful, because people can plan around that. They can, am I going to leave the area or not? You know, those are kind of core decisions. So I'm glad to hear you can move towards that. A couple things. I really appreciated you using what I call the 3 Ps, the produce, preserve, and protect renters. I think we need all of them. You know, I often think about cost of housing in the context of my work when I worked on the Senate Education Committee, and the cost of student loans. There's always this chicken or egg of, we would always get pressure and sometimes pushback from folks and want us not to raise the amount of student loans that are federally backed, because there was this incentive structure. If you look at it over time, it's undeniable that the more loans and Pell Grants have become available, particularly loans, the higher tuition has gone, and to the point now where it's astronomical, and it is priced out. It is the bubble that will burst, and within our life, within my probably right when my kids go to school, probably college, something has to happen, because if you look at the year-over-year cost of higher education, it just is unsustainable. And I think so. There's a question of, what are the appropriate regulatory controls on increased, in this case, cost of housing, rent? We're going to have that debate here, but I think we have to have it, because it's a huge part of the problem. You mentioned on your slide that nearly 20% of the people who receive the voucher are still spending 50% or 46% of their income on rent. And based on your numbers, the average voucher is $1,267. That's a great number to help. And the average tenant payment is $518, which means the average person, average income is $1,000 a month. Just think about who we're serving here. So these are not folks that, you know, to get off of that, you know, the conversation we were having about how do we move people off the rolls at those levels of income, which is a whole broader discussion about what we pay people and wages and wage growth and all that, which you don't control. But I just think that we have to be careful about there might be a small population, you know, that can move off, but because of the issues that this population, and the fact that many of these, I think you said, how many are seniors?
30%.
Right, and that has to be, I'm assuming that trend line has gone up as we continue to age. So, you know, in a lot of ways, you are providing housing for our most vulnerable residents, who probably don't have a ton of opportunity. If you look at the self-sufficiency standard for a family of 4, near $100,000, you know, above, you know, these are folks that are making $1,100 a month. You know, a large percentage, not everybody, but so I just think we have to keep that in context of our programs. But I do appreciate the shallow subsidy conversation that you mentioned, that there are definitely people on the waiting list that could benefit from a shallow subsidy. DC Flex, as Councilmember Friedson mentioned, but when we call our program MoCo Boost, right? That's our MoCoBoost.com that's our guaranteed income program that's providing 300 families with $800 a month. And I just met with about 100 of those families recently. They bring them, they're brought together. Many of them are using this money on housing, but not all. You know, one mother she uses it to pay for her minivan because she has 4 kids and she needed a minivan to get them around. That's in her payment. So I think the flexibility of this money is important. And so I would say to my colleagues, as we're thinking about how we do this, I think we want to get away from this is for housing, this is for food, we want to get more towards this. You take this money and make your decisions. No one makes better decisions with money than people who really need it. And I think we're seeing that. We're going to study that. We're studying it rigorously with the Urban Institute and with Morgan State University. But I think we're going to learn from MoCo Boost how people are spending this money, and it'll instruct how maybe we provide subsidies to other people going forward. So the question I have for you, and if you have any comment on any of that, you're welcome to say it. But the question I was going to ask was the shallow subsidy. do you have a sense, because that's basically being used as crisis aversion right now, you know, at that's the way our DHHS is using. Would you have a sense of, or could you develop what you think that number would be and how it could be used for some of the, I know you have to go through the data of who's on your list, but do you have a sense of what that would be, level that would be at to be of assistance?
I think we would have to look at the data to see how individuals on our waiting list are rent burdened. But if we look at the 20% of individuals in our voucher program, we know that that amount for each family is about $150 a month of a rent burden. And so if we're really just thinking and using that as like a pilot or a subset of the population, we could look to see how many households could we ensure weren't rent burdened that were just in the voucher program. I'm awful with math, so I won't presume to come up with this calculation on the spot. But I think that that's one indicator if we wanted to look at a population. Again, as we look at our waiting list, we'll know even more. But that gives us at least some context of who's in our program, how much more are they paying per month, and how much would it cost to take away the rent burden for those families. Yes.
Yeah, that's helpful. And then we should make a formal connection of overlay as we're finding out data from, for example, these 300 families that are MOCO Boost. We should tell you who's spending what on housing.
Yes.
and everything. Like that should be part of what we're looking at.
Yes.
And we should definitely do that. Last thing I said, I got a report back. I was texted while I was up here on HB 826 and SB 848. Unfortunately, they're stuck in committee and crossovers tomorrow, so the likelihood of them passing is pretty much nil this year, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have anything more than that to add. Unfortunately, we did. Ms. Andrews testified in Annapolis on behalf of the legislation. There was a good coalition supporting the legislation, so we were.
So we got to push for that.
We've been rooting for it.
I don't know
Yeah.
if we took action on it. We should have if we didn't, but I'm
It was
sure
introduced relatively late in the session.
Yeah,
I'm not sure
yeah.
if you did. But
What would 15 million mean for Montgomery County, though? That's a drop in the bucket, though, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at 40 million for some of those other jurisdictions, produced maybe 3,500 vouchers, so maybe it's 1,000 vouchers statewide, something like that.
So we figure we get a sixth of that.
But it's once you get the program established, maybe there's an opportunity to advocate for more money over time.
Okay.
The only other thing I wanted to I forgot to add early on is that we are going to be meeting with our Maryland senators and Representative Raskin later this week as part of our national sort of lobby day for housing authorities across the country coming into Washington to try to emphasize how important these programs are and make the case to them. We're obviously very hopeful that at minimum we'll be held harmless in the upcoming negotiations, and maybe there's an opportunity to add some additional resources.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Appreciate your mentioning the legislation and share the frustration and disappointment. I will say if it's 160 or so vouchers, I mean that would be a substantial increase to the new number of vouchers that we would be receiving. Is it anywhere near enough? No. Is a lot better than nothing? Absolutely. With that, I'll yield to you, Councilmember.
Just a couple of things. The first one, I just want to make sure that you know that I think, Ms. Andrews, you're awesome. And I think, I mean it. I don't say this lightly. And I think you have a great team, and I know that you guys care, and you're a great partner for Montgomery County. So know that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So the second thing, I just wanted to also, I love what Councilmember Will Jawando mentioned about the MOCO Boost. I think it's great that you pointed it out. At the end of the day, especially if we want to look at those young folks who are part of this voucher problem, not putting the seniors and people with disability, but the young folks who are out of the program, who might say, well, I don't want to be out because what if I have a baby? I need to pay for childcare, like all these different expenses. We want to create incentives for them to move out, but feel safe doing so. So I look forward to the update on the MOCO Boost and see how that can be combined with your initiatives, and that could be part of your strategic planning coming up. I look forward to more ideas. Having children is expensive. I have 2 of those. And, going to school and food and, also money for kids to have, summer camps, all that good stuff it's vital to have quality of life. And we want our families to enjoy that. That's not, luxury. That's a necessity. So maybe we looking forward to a strategic plan combining that program, and maybe we should be putting more money into that program, more families. So that's all. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And of course, I want to, on the public record, thank my team. The team here today, as well as for our previous presentations, have delivered what I consider to be hopefully good information and guidance to not only this committee, but to the public. And we thank you every time we have an opportunity to do so.
Well, we appreciate it. You inherited a terrific team. You added to it with some people we know very well, which we very much appreciate, and really appreciate the partnership and your leadership and continue working with you. I had one follow-up, and then I just wanted to go through kind of what our next steps are going to be in terms of coming back with the data. You mentioned the 90 days being the period of time, and I assume that is what the 4% is. Right, so it's like unemployment. If unemployment is at 0, it means nobody is looking for or finding jobs, which would be a stagnated economy, which we wouldn't want. If the number were 100, it would mean we're not offering vouchers to anybody, because you need time to identify somebody who's eligible and allow them time to find the home that they need, that serves their purposes and gives you time to do the inspections and the other HUD requirements that you have. So I assume that's what the 4% is, which makes sense. I'm wondering, as a policy, you mentioned 90%, and you can get an extension to go to 90 days, and you get an extension to go to 180 days. Do you have data on what is the average, from the time that you contact a voucher prospective holder, someone on the wait list, to the time where the voucher is used for them to move into a home?
Yes.
What that timeline is?
It's 90 days.
So 90 days is the average?
That is. We looked at the data over the past 5 years, and that's the average over the past 5 years. Last year, the average was 70 days. The prior year, it was much higher during the pandemic. I want to say it was 180 days, and the prior year, 114 days. So COVID had a lot of impact on the housing authorities and our families in securing units, going inside of units, searching, inspecting, etc. So we've seen a progression where the search time and of getting houses is being lowered. It's reducing. But
so do we think it's going to go back to the 70 days that it was pre-pandemic?
I think so. I mean, there are a lot of other variables as well, but yes, the payment standards also have an impact on, people's credit. There are a lot of things, but yes, I think it will get shorter.
Do we have a sense for how long or how that compares, that length of time compares to other jurisdictions?
I don't.
I will say in the District of Columbia, you start off with 180 days. That's a moving to work housing authority. And many individuals seek additional extensions even with the 180 days. So I think 70 days is a pretty quick turnaround. There are other ways that we could explore potentially expediting that we will look into, and I'll be working with our team on the potential of pre-inspecting certain units so that there are units that are easily and quickly available. But as it stands, we also are adding additional staff to help with looking for units, and just included that in our upcoming budget here, so that we can provide additional assistance to individuals who do need support. We do provide on our website and through other resources information on where units are available in the county, and so we really do try to encourage encourage locating the unit to happen as quickly as possible. The other process is really we have to get in and do what's called a housing quality standard inspection, and it's a HUD mandated process. If there are any findings in that process, the landlord has a period of time to remediate those concerns and issues. We have to get back out to that unit. That sometimes can be a process that takes a iterative process that takes some time to get clearance. And then once we're able to get the unit cleared, the individual is able to move quickly into their unit.
Great. Well, keep us posted on that. I think the pre-inspection is a great idea. If that's able to follow HUD standards and expedite the timeline, I think that would be great. If you could keep us posted on your transition to move closer back to pre-pandemic timelines. Obviously, pandemic changed everything for all of our processes and our lifestyles, and hopefully, returning to some semblance of what it was previously would, be important and helpful for us to know. Okay, so we're going to follow up on this conversation. This was intended to be a baseline conversation to talk about this huge issue that we have that is very layered in terms of its challenge, where we need lots of help from every level of government, federal, state, as well. You're going to follow up with us on your efforts to aggregate and disaggregate the data so we can better understand the situation. We're going to hear back from you on the strategic plan process, and we'll schedule a time based on those two schedules of when would be an appropriate time for you to come back to update us on how that process is progressing, and then ultimately the results of that process. And I foresee that as a two-step process, coming back to talk about what it's going to look like and level setting expectations. Doesn't have to be a hugely long conversation, then coming back subsequent to that of what we actually learned and how we're going to implement changes that you decide to move forward on following that process. Does that
Sounds great. Yes, thank you.
Appreciate it. All right, and then you'll be back in many other opportunities to talk about the Housing Production Fund, to talk about another fund that we're going to be working on, to talk about all the various aspects of the budget that you are working on, and we look forward to having you back before the committee to talk about all the other aspects of the Housing Opportunities Commission and your team and your work. So thank you, and with that, we are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.